Joining us, it's time for the second hour of Antigua Barbuda Today. We begin our slate of interviews in this second hour, and we're sitting with a very distinguished guest this morning on the couch. She's Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, Dr. Natalia Kanem, now joins us. She's been in Antigua for meetings, but she's here to shed some more light on the meetings and how her experience has been so far, and her basically propositions for further development here in Antigua Barbuda and countries like ours. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning. Delighted to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. We are glad to have you here in Antigua Barbuda. Just enlighten us, if you would, as to why you are here, and then we can get into further discussion.
Well, as a senior official of the United Nations, we work very closely with the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. And as you might know, you're leaders in the movement on climate.
Yes.
The Wadadli Action Platform is the reason that I came, along with a significant number of international visitors, including from the Pacific.
All right, I would ask you what your impressions are so far of the country itself, and then we get to the meetings.
It's not my first time in your
Great.
gorgeous country, and the hospitality has been amazing, and the meeting has gone far beyond talk towards action.
I think that's one of the major things when we talk about here about these, what we call talk shops. We hope that they don't turn out to be just talk shops. What are some of the major developments you think that have come out of the meetings?
Well, at the moment, Antigua and Barbuda are chairing the Wadadli Action Platform under an association that tries to ally small island nations to be able to be a force, especially when it comes to changing the climate order, with the seas getting hotter and hotter. And I have to say, small yet mighty. It's been a very coordinated set of discussions, including about what young people need to be looking for in leading us towards that better future.
Yeah, very important. Apart from youth, one of the major themes we've heard has been that of resilience.
Yes.
Talk to us about that, what it means, particularly from the United Nations perspective, and what it does mean for us and how we can work at being better resilient.
Resilience is the concept of being able to bounce back after a shock. But what has been added here is the feature of preparing better. So working with some of your agencies here, like NODS, the disaster reduction theme, means a population that's alert, but also, again, negotiating the type of trade policy, the type of sustainable development policies that make a difference for an ordinary person. Resilience means that, okay, you have hurricane, you have flood, whatever it is, but there is a plan. I understand how I fit into that. And again, as a young person, I also am equipped to be able to imagine how are we going to change the status quo, which is not working well.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because we've been talking for a while about adaptation and mitigation and climate financing. How do you propose that we go about better negotiating, though? Because from a small island developing states perspective, we talk about who's responsible for some of the shocks that we're experiencing and to what extent we should be better prepared to bounce back, as you would have said.
Well, again, I think we are taking our cues from what people like Ambassador Webson, who is a leader on this in the United Nations, is guiding us to do. And the fact that this alliance is international, that the Pacific, parts of Asia, and the world are united in thinking about this is very important. From my perspective as the head of UNFPA, which is the Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency of the United Nations, I also understand that women and girls are a big part of that key. Planning for people with disabilities is also part of that key. And you know, there's no one who better to deal with these issues than people who know where the shoe pinches.
That's a new term, but I think we understand exactly what that means. And you talked about young people being involved, women and girls, some of the disabled communities. Have we made progress in Antigua Barbuda as far as you've been able to tell? And what are some of those other challenges that perhaps we need to circumvent?
Well, look, there are many challenges. We have to be honest about that. But Antigua and Barbuda is one of my favorite examples of what can happen when people take steps to do something beyond the talk, as you said, Ursula. Because, you know, in this country, you've done something that very few have done, which is to look after the situation of a teenage girl. So your adolescent pregnancy rate has been cut in half over the past years, and that's a huge achievement. It's an investment in young people. There's also been a lot of attention, I think, to the ability of young men to be able to safely traverse from adolescence into manhood. These are fundamental things, the family, intimacy, respect for women, making sure that violence is not considered normal. It can never be normal. So I think, you know, what does this have to do with resilience? You need to be, to have that forethought, to be able to make sure that we carve out spaces for honest dialogue. And this is the way that imagination and innovation and application of things like entrepreneurship come real.
Because don't think, at least from our perspective, we were able to really imagine how sexual and reproductive health even contributes to development when we think about the overall picture. And as you've rightly said, we've cut the teenage pregnancy rates in half. Of course, when it does happen, it becomes nationwide news because it's so not frequent when it happens. So I'm glad you're able to touch on that, as well as the transition between adolescence and adulthood, because there are workshops coming up where that's concerned. And just this evening, we're having a live show on gender-based violence, particularly against men. So that's something that we're looking into here in Antigua Barbuda as well. But that's a niche area. How are you pushing that agenda, though, in terms of making sure that countries understand how important that is?
Well, this afternoon, when I sit with your Family Planning Association, which has a long and productive history in this country, and actually the Caribbean as a region needs to have much more dialogue and conversation. We say there are 3 zeros that I'm looking to achieve. The first one is to make sure that people can plan their families according to the size they want and spacing of the children. It is a drain on the human body to be pregnant if you're not ready, like if you're young or if the children are coming too close together. And this is something that I'm very proud that the religious communities in Antigua and Barbuda and in the region are having that dialogue and giving the right guidance so people can have rights and choices. The second one is a tragedy every time a mother dies in childbirth. And if you don't die, there's so many other things that can happen to you as the pregnant mom or the baby that's coming. So ending death in childbirth, that's the second zero. And the last one you've already alluded to, and I really feel that for this new generation of Antigua, Barbuda, young people, they're gonna solve that conundrum of violence, of war, right? The United Nations stands for peace. Peace in your heart and in your home is part of world peace. Charity begins at home, right? So we can't have big peace if we're beating each other and insulting each other, et cetera. I'm also concerned about online violence, by the way.
Yes.
Women and girls, everybody needs to be safe when you're online and on your phone.
That's also a major theme coming out because the Caribbean Telecommunications Union hosting something for young people, a function coming up on the 20th, where they look at staying safe online and how young people can more safely use the internet, because a lot of people have access to them when they are online. And if you had a single message for Antigua Barbuda moving forward, I know your time here is very limited, but moving forward, what can we work on to ensure that we progress and work towards achieving those sustainable development goals?
One of the big things coming up is your census. And I want to make sure that everyone is counted and that people understand that they count. That means we have to ask the right questions. If someone is not visible, if someone is not counted, how are we going to help them get the services, the education, the future that they want? I say over and over, don't underestimate the power of someone who comes from a small country like this. Imagination and human potential is unlimited, and you know you've made your mark on the cultural scene in things like engineering, what you're doing with your new university. So my big message is go forth, do what you have to do, and keep peace in the heart and in the home.
Excellent. We have an ambassador, a former ambassador to the United Nations says, first there's God and the next greatest gift to mankind is United Nations. He says that all the time. So kudos to you and to your team, the work that you've been doing. Ambassador Hurst, I'm sure he's listening. He loves saying that every time we interview him. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Kanem, for joining us this morning. Really appreciate this conversation. When do you fly out?
Sorry?
When do you fly out?
Tomorrow.
Oh.
I'm going to see a bit of the country, have some of this famous cuisine I keep hearing about, and I'm out tomorrow. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, very welcome. So Dr. Natalia Kanem joined us for a first interview in this hour this morning. We're very happy to have her here. She was part of the Without the Action platform meetings that would have concluded yesterday. They were held Monday and Tuesday. Some more meetings to follow today for Dr. Kanem. All right, join us after the break. More interviews right after this.